All right, well, I'm going to get started. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This talk is on Windows Management Instrumentation. If you're not here for this talk, then I won't be offended if you get up and go, but I hope you are here for this talk, so thanks for coming. So if you're going to take a picture of one slide, actually take a picture of this one, because this is actually where the link to the slides. So if you want these slides for later, I'll let you guys take a picture of that real quick. These slides are going to be posted with the video, I hope, as well. So if you find this on YouTube, you'll be able to get to the slides. I'll keep it up. It has a couple videos in it embedded for the demos, but I'll be trying to do some of those demos live, and I'll be showing some of them. Okay. So our agenda for this talk, quick hello world about WMI, using it for evil, and then using it for good. So hello world. Hi, I'm Jaime, or Root, hopefully, with a prompt like that. I am Jay Geiger. I'm on Twitter. I tweet about things. Follow me if you like. Wumbo.in is my website. I blog about computer stuff, security things, sysadmin, cool tricks I haven't found anywhere else that I had to dig through. I'm an IT manager for my company, and I also do some security work and development as well. And I love teaching, and that's why I love speaking at these kinds of things. There's going to be only SpongeBob GIFs in this, by the way. So who are you guys? So I'm going to do a couple raise your hands in this. How many people do we have that have heard of WMI before? Know what it is? Have you used it in an engagement, in a red team engagement? Okay. Have you used it in a blue team sense or in defense? Okay. Cool. Any PowerShell programmers? Couple. All right. So there's going to be a lot of PowerShell stuff. We're going to go through that. I'll step through it. If you have questions or I'm talking too fast, please tell me, because that's what we're all here to learn. If you have a question, I guarantee you someone else in the room has that question. Please ask. Or find me afterwards if you don't feel comfortable. That's totally fine. So what is this WMI thing? Well, it stands for Windows Management Instrumentation, like you saw in the first slide. And it's based on this web-based enterprise management standard. It's a big standard that was put out by a group for IT management for data collection, which is awesome. So we'll learn more about that. It's based on this common information model, which is an object-oriented model. How many, do you have any object-oriented programmers in here? Any Java programmers or anybody like that? C++? OK. So I'll go through what object-oriented means for those of you who are not programmers in the next couple slides. But we'll learn about this CIM thing. What is WMI? Basically, it's an interface to interact with objects on Windows. And the really important bullet at the bottom there is it's available on every version of Windows since Windows 2000. So it makes it a very powerful tool to go all the way up from Windows 2000, which you should not be running, to current Windows Server 2016 or Windows 10. And it's remotely accessible, which is really awesome. When you learn some of the things you can do with it, you'll learn that it being remotely accessible might not necessarily be the best thing, or it's great if you're on a red team. So what is this common information model? It's basically a model. It's a standard. The document is very long. I've read some of it. It's very dry, but it breaks down into defining how to represent anything within a computer system. And so WMI is Microsoft's implementation of this web-based standard and the common information model we're going to go through. So the components you have, which I'm going to go through each one of them, are namespaces, classes, instances, properties, methods, events, and event consumers. So I have a slide for each one of these, so we'll go through them now. A namespace is a collection of classes. And you can have sub-namespaces and all these things. I'm going to show this visually at the end of the kind of explanation of this. So don't worry about visualizing it in your head right now. They all exist under this thing called root. So there's the default namespace, which is root sim v2, common information model 2. And then we have another one that we're going to worry about, which is root subscription. So keep that in the back of your head. So like I said, these namespaces are a collection of classes. And classes are basically the definitions of some type of object. A perfect example is a user account on the machine. So you'll have a user account class. It'll have properties, which are key value pairs. So it'll have a account name or a user ID or an SID, and then a value to that. The values actually are put into instances. So you say, here I have these properties that I can fill out. I'll create an instance of this class, and that is administrator with the SID, whatever, and their home directory, or whatever kind of attributes that class has. They can have methods, which is also cool. So the one that I'm going to be talking about a lot is Win32 process, which is a class that represents every process on the system. So I can query this WMI interface for processes on the system. So it has process ID, process name, who it's running as. And it also has methods like create or terminate. And create is a great method for attackers. We'll get into that later. So any of these properties can be strings, integers, whatever. So how do we talk to this thing? It's basically a database of information that we have and that we can act on. So if you guys, how many people have done SQL before? SQL queries. OK. So for those familiar with it, this will look familiar. If you're not, it's fairly easy to follow. So you're selecting from the table or the object type, the class, Win32 user account, where disabled equals false. So you're looking for all of the enabled user accounts. This query is going to return you a bunch of objects that are all of the enabled user accounts on the system. So what can we use to interface with this? Well, a couple different things. There's a command line tool called WMIC that can be used. I think it exists on Windows 2000. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that one. But this one is the most reliable tool because it's on most platforms. WMI Explorer, which is a front end, which I have a demo of the next slide so you guys can kind of see. Powershell, which we'll be focusing on to create and access classes later in the presentation. You can access it from the Windows API, programming, C#, C++, C. And then there's tons of other interfaces to this. Like I said, this has been around for so long that it's been adapted to so many different languages. Those are just 3 that I looked up. There's tons more that it actually has. So I have this WMI Explorer demo that I'll talk through real quick. I'll explain what it's actually showing so you don't have to squint. So you go under the root namespace. This is root simv2. And you can see there's all of these different classes. So Win32 account, Win32 SID, Win32 process, Win32 binary, all this stuff. So all this is, each one of these is a class that you can query. So current time, it has information on number of fans that are connected. This is an AWS machine, so there's no fans connected directly to this virtual machine. But the user groups, this is a specific example, the one that kind of is more understandable. This is user groups. This is the administrator group. And you can see all of the information that this offers. So like I said, this says domain, name, description, SID. So yeah, zoomed in here for you. So you can see that the group is, the name is administrator, the SID, the local account, whether it's local account or not. So it has a ton of information. So this is just one of those many things. And you saw how long that list was. Huge. So there's tons of information you query from this. And like I said, these are inheritable. So this inherits from the Win32 account group. What else? Yeah. So I will kind of skip over that, the rest of that one. But like I said, this is what the interface looks like. And this allows you to run through and query everything. You have your namespaces in this panel. You can enumerate. These are your classes. And then you'll actually be able to go and view instances of classes inside here. And you can check out what properties they have. Like I said, I don't expect you guys to be able to squint and see this. But you can see all the properties they have and what types they are. And you can also see all the methods they have. I believe the demo lays out the process class. So you can see the methods create and terminate of the process class. OK. Any questions so far? What this thing is? Yes? No, it's just Win32. Pretty sure there's historical reasons for that. That's like probably one of their last worries, right? Just changing the date, like the database names. But yeah, that is true. Yep. Yep. Tons of that. OK. So, yes, sir. Yes. You can look at the parent process ID. But on Windows, that's not really reliable. There are functions to actually change the parent process ID. Look into that if you haven't. It's really cool. You can absolutely, based on what the system gives you for information. You can do your best. Whatever the system gives you, like that's if you open Task Manager, it'll have the same list. It's the same information. So this is like an alternative. It's a great alternative API to query stuff with that's common throughout all of Windows till Windows 2000. I'm not 100% sure about that one. You might have to hook something for that. There are tools to do that in the sysinternal suite. So I'm going to do a quick overview of the kind of how to interact with this in PowerShell. One of these things doesn't work on the most recent version of PowerShell I tried, but just a heads up for that. So your best friend for examining this is going to be get WMI object. You can specify the namespace, which is default root simv2, the class, and then the filter to get objects. These -query and -filter will not work. For some reason, it's broken in PowerShell. It's been documented online. But you can use PowerShell filters, which you'll see later, to filter stuff out. You can use the list command to list the classes in a namespace. I want to see all of them in root simv2 and watch it scroll all the way down the screen. I'm going to get the same result as this window where I have classes here. Invoke WMI method. So those methods I talked about earlier, where you can maybe create or terminate a process, you can do remotely or locally. You need credentials. You need administrative credentials, so it's not just wide open to the world. But that's something you can play with. And if you're not familiar with PowerShell, to get help with these commands, you just type help and then the command. So it's really, really nice. Set WMI instance. You can create new instances of classes for certain things. One such, we'll talk about creating classes and actually do some of that later. Remove WMI object. Be careful with this one. You can actually remove whole classes and then mess up anything that's querying it. So if you remove the Win32 process class, it's probably not good because anything looking for processes will be that. Yeah, what's it? I'm not 100% sure about that one. That would be good to look into. I would hope that it wouldn't delete the MOF file, but stranger things have happened on Windows. Register WMI event. You can actually register local events to monitor for on local PowerShell console. There's a way to do that persistently that we'll talk about later. And you can actually also interface with these common information model objects directly. So this is how you would interface with them remotely. You'll have to start up a sim session. You can do this command, get command -noun sim star, and that will get you all the commands for sim. I'm not going to be talking about those series of commands. We're only going to need the ones up here. So basic PowerShell demo. So this says get command -noun WMI star, and then you can see get WMI object, invoke WMI method. You can see that these commands exist. So we're going to try to query for a class, Win32 process. And then we're going to say property process name -eq PowerShell.exe. So I'm running PowerShell. I know that process is running. So I'm just querying for PowerShell.exe. I'm sorry if this is so hard to see. The lighting's sort of weird. So you can see that this got returned. This object got returned, and it has a process name, PowerShell.exe. And then we can interact with that object by setting it to a variable. So this becomes a PowerShell object. So we set it to the process to I. We can check out the process name. It's got the attribute process name. And then we can also check out all the properties it has to offer by just querying the PowerShell object and see all this data you have from this interface. Like I said, these slides will be up, and the videos are embedded, so you can check them out. Look closer. PowerShell demo. OK, so kind of had an interruption to talk about PowerShell and interacting with this thing in PowerShell. I haven't covered the rest of the parts of the common information model that are defined that I'm talking about in this slide set. So where it gets really interesting is you can have events, filters, consumers, and then binders. So essentially, you have these classes that can fire events. So there's Win32 process start trace. So that'll fire an event whenever a process starts. And so you can query for that and then do actions based on that. So these filters, you have to write a filter to query for these things. And they're in WQL, that language we talked about before, that SQL familiar thing. So if we want to know, if we want an event to fire whenever an instance of command prompt pops up, maybe, this is just a contrived example, but you can say select star from Win32 process start trace within 5, so every 5 seconds check for this thing, where process name equals cmd.exe. And then it will fire, your event filter will fire, and you can query for that and do something based on that. And we'll talk about what actions we can actually do, these consumers, in a couple slides. Consumers basically act on these events when you bind them together with a filter to consumer binder. And you can run commands, you can send emails, you can write to logs, so you can see where that can kind of be useful. And all of these, like I said, you can have subclasses. So you can have a parent class and then a child class which inherits all of its attributes, and then you can extend it. So just an example of that, all event consumers that we're going to talk about in this presentation are subs or parent or children of the event consumer class. So we'll go into like actually using an example of these in a sec here. So this is just the overview. And now using WMI for evil. So we're here to attack stuff. If you're here to attack stuff, this is great. These methods have actually been used out in the wild, right? So APT29, the Russians, anybody hear the DNC hack recently, right? Yeah, right. This guy gets it. So the guys, some of the breaches actually use this backdoor. So this is being used out in the wild by real adversaries. So there's this root subscription namespace that allows you to create special event consumers. So if you can read these, you see that they might be very useful. Command line event consumer allows you to actually run things on a command line, so execute arbitrary code as a system user. ActiveScript event consumer will allow you to run VB script or JavaScript, also useful. The log file event consumer allows you to write to a log file when that happens, so useful for blue teamers if you're using this method. NT event log consumer, write to the event log, or then SMTP event consumer, which allow you to send an email. You can mix and match these. You can use them together. So the APT29 fileless backdoor, essentially what it did was it registered an event filter that queried Win32 local time, and it said every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at 11:33 a.m. local time, run this thing. And it essentially would, it registered a command line event consumer to run this crazy encoded PowerShell script that would go and do C2, exfiltrate data, get commands, grab arbitrary executables, whatever the operators wanted. So this will run on a schedule, which is great. Great for attackers. Interval backdoors, if you want a persistent callback that calls back every 15 seconds, you can use this thing called the IntervalTimerinstruction class. And then you can create this, and it'll fire what's called a timer event every however many milliseconds you would like. So then in your event filter, you say select star from timer event within 15 where timer ID equals whatever your timer name is. And what that will do is will allow you to run an event consumer. You bind a consumer to this. You basically have a scheduled task that runs every X milliseconds. So you can execute commands. You can use the full power of PowerShell, and you can grab things from the internet and execute them. You can upload files. You can, I don't know, nuke the whole system if you'd like every 15 seconds. I guess you only do that once. For something like nuking the system, you probably want to use an absolute timer instruction, which will execute at a specific point in time only once. So fire at a specific time. So that's pretty cool. I have a demo of that. It works. These were all failing to start last night, so I'm happy that it actually works. So what's up on the screen right now? The command is set-WMI instance -namespace root subscription. So like I said, we have to act in that space to create that specific consumer. We're going to create ourselves a class, an instance of the IntervalTimerinstruction class with the parameters timer ID equals iTimer, and then the interval between events is 15,000, which is 15 seconds. So every 15 seconds, we're going to fire this event. There we go. The resolution's better on that now. All right, so we're going to do that. It created successfully. The next thing we have to do is register an event filter, and I am copying and pasting these. We have to register an event filter. I know that's hard to see. I apologize. Which basically does what I said on the slide here, the last slide, which was select star from timer event within 15, so query every 15 seconds for this event, where the timer ID equals iTimer. So this event filter is going to essentially grab that event, that every 15-second event. And so we'll register that real quick. And then the final, the next thing we have to do is register a consumer. So this is the part you haven't seen yet. The consumer is actually a simple command line script. So you set the command line template for this command line event consumer to message star hello world I am WMI. And so I paste that in just to show you what that's actually going to do when this thing runs. So it's going to pop up a message box on the screen. Very, very non-functional example for somebody that's going to be attacking. But you're definitely going to be able to put whatever you want there. You can, like I said, run PowerShell commands. So then bind them together with this filter to consumer binding. That gets created. And then within a couple seconds here, we'll see it pop up. It'll be checking for it. We'll see the message pop up. And it's actually run from an elevated context. And so if you go into the WMI Explorer, you can see that the event consumer was created as a command line event consumer with the command message star hello. The event filter was created with our query. It's still up, coming up. Filter to consumer binding was created with the two names of our filter and consumer. And then the interval timer instruction that fires every 15 seconds was created as well. I have the script to remove that. You can schedule things from this. And I know people will check scheduled tasks. I know people will check their run keys and things like that, and typical persistence locations. But this is something that people don't really think about. How many people in here run security for their infrastructures? All right. Do you guys check for WMI stuff? Do you guys specifically check in your? Yeah. So yes. Autoruns does catch this. Yes. So if you're running, but that's on a host-by-host basis. If you're running a massive infrastructure, you're not going to notice one host that gets infected with this. Most likely, it's definitely tough. So it's interesting. There's that. Another evil thing, I saw this when I put this talk together. I saw this tweet and I couldn't help but include it. But Matt Graber is a PowerShell wizard. He's a Windows wizard. He's a good dude, and there's this tool SimSweep that's on the good end, but you can actually recover BitLocker keys from WMI, which is terrifying. Like, this is your drive encryption key. Like, so that's the impact of this, right? You can schedule tasks. You can query for information. It's great for recon. And you can also recover things like the BitLocker key password, the BitLocker password, which is, for those of you who aren't familiar with BitLocker, it's drive encryption for Windows. So that's huge. Like I said, you need local admin to get this information. But compromises happen. So using WMI for good, I think that's my favorite GIF in the entire world. I don't know. So some stuff, I couldn't just give you guys the evil without the good. Hello. Yes. No. All this stuff has to be created from an administrator context. But it can be done so remotely if you have port 135 open, which is, that's like a port that people usually leave alone on Windows networks. So I've been able to do this. You have to have, I think RPC has to be unfiltered inbound, and then also Windows manages that automatically unless you're running some other firewall. On a Windows network, you're going to allow those ports because that's what the domain controller used to talk via RPC endpoint map stuff. So it's the same kinds of ports that Active Directory uses. So if they compromise, and I'm pretty sure you can log into this with a domain admin account if you get it. So or a remote use, certain groups, certain permissions. All right. So I've spent a lot of time in this tool just looking for things that are cool to go through, and one of the things that I found was actually Windows Defender has a WMI interface. So you can use this for good things. So it's at the namespace root Microsoft Security Client. There's a malware class. So I don't know if you guys can see, you will be able to see this, but Security Client and then malware, we can actually pull up, adjust this here. There are instances of, not sure, oh, there we go, instances. So every time it detects a threat, it'll actually register in WMI so you can query it. So these are all, you can tell how many times I tested this demo, because that's the number of times I tested this demo. So you can get notified when malware is detected. I mean, like I said, that's kind of a not so useful example, but think about whenever Windows Defender detects something, which Windows Defender is actually fairly decent these days, better than like old Windows security protection used to be, which was nothing. If you fire an event, you can run a quarantine script, you can run a data collection script. So think of the possibilities there with like, as soon as Windows Defender catches something, you can get the system state. So they can't, so you have it at that snapshot at that state in time. That's pretty neat. So you can get notified. You can use that same event filter consumer trick to actually query for this and then do something based on it. You can, so you can do whatever you like, whatever a PowerShell script can do, or whatever a VB script can do. You can fire in response to this. So collect data, or whatever. So essentially, what this is doing is, I wish the resolution would up. See if I can fix that. HD, there we go. All right. So essentially, here we're creating. It's impossible to see. I'll read it off to you. So essentially, we're creating an event filter that queries the root Microsoft Security Client namespace and says, all right, whenever an instance creation event fires, select star from instance creation event, which is an event that fires whenever an instance of any class in that namespace is created, and the target instance is a malware, is the class type malware. We're gonna meet this filter. So we'll register it under the root subscription namespace. We'll register a consumer for this, which in this example, like I said, we're just going to do something simple, which we're going to pop up a little message that says, hey, you have malware at this directory, and this user launched it, and the Windows Defender severity ID is blank. So we'll register that as a command line event consumer, like we did before with the malicious part. And then finally, you bind them both together with a filter to consumer binding. That was created successfully. And now we'll go, as an attacker, we'll go and we'll unzip Mimikatz. So we know that's going to get caught. That's Windows Defender's has that. It's a tool to dump passwords out of memory and other things, credentials out of memory. So we can see that Windows Defender did find it. And then in a couple seconds here, there will be a notification that will run showing that our filter worked. So you can see, pops up a message that says, malware at C users administrators desktop Mimikatz win32 mimiderv.sys, which is the driver for Mimikatz that uses .memory, and then from administrator severity 4. You can take the information from that class and feed it into whatever scripts you're running on the command line in response to this. You can say, hey, we have this malware, this information collection script that we're supposed to run when the system detects malware. Perfect. Feed the information to it, tell it where the malware is, and then you can, fire off an alert to. You can also do event logs too. So you can fire off an alert if you're collecting central logs and monitoring. You can fire that off as well. I'm fairly certain that Windows Defender already writes an event log, but just to the kind of possibilities of what you can do, you can send an email as well with the description. You know exactly which user is trying to infect your machines when Windows Defender catches it. And anybody can develop and make interfaces for WMI. So I'm not sure if there are any antivirus providers that are doing this, but they can provide an interface to this if they would like. So as you can see, go through, and it's in the WMI Explorer. You can see, all the information, the path, and all the stuff it gives you. Category ID, it gives you threat ID, it gives you the threat name, the domain it was on, the time it was executed, the action that was taken against it. So it gives you all this information that you can use and siphon off somewhere else. There's a tool called SimSweep, which essentially it's an open source PowerShell project that was mentioned earlier to grab the BitLocker keys. But if you're a blue teamer, if you're running an environment, you have this open, why why would you not use it for collection on your host to see if anything's wrong? There's a wealth of information there. You can go and, like I said, you can collect this stuff remotely. So SimSweep will allow you, it's designed to be used at a large-scale enterprise, with many, many Windows machines. So you can use this to collect forensics data if you know something's wrong. You can use this to just generally query stuff if you're curious to collect. It's on GitHub. Contribute if you can. If you know PowerShell, it's a great tool for threat hunting incident response because, you know, gathering that much information off hundreds and hundreds of machines is a tough task. But if you can do it all remotely with a click of a button, awesome. So how do you find and stop this? Register a consumer filter to tell you if there are any new consumers created. So if someone malicious is trying to persist using this method, you can use that instance creation event thing we did before with the malware class. You can say, hey, if anybody registers one of these, tell me about it, or delete it. Probably tell you about it so you know where there's a leak in your infrastructure, or if somebody's trying to do something nasty. Just delete them all and make sure there are none there. There are legitimate uses for this. I will tell you that the Amazon machine that I spun up for this demo, for the recorded demos for this, they all have at least one registered event consumer filter and binder. So this is a real thing that people use sometimes. Make sure you're not deleting anything important off your system. I don't remember what it was for, but it was something. Hello. I have the command in the slideshow notes. I forget what it is. I didn't feel like pasting it in here because it's kind of like, if you're curious, go check out the slides. But there is a way to turn on verbose logging for this. It's off by default, which I was getting to. So the logging, the verbose logging, I think the log file that after doing all the demos, I looked at the log file, and it was like 20 lines long. Didn't have a single command that I ran in it. You'll see the access for it, especially if you run it remotely. You'll see successful login ID 4624, which is the successful login ID for Windows event logs with type 3 network. I'm pretty sure other things are going to fire that, but for administrator accounts, that shouldn't be firing all that often unless you're doing a lot of remote activity normally. For standard infrastructure, I don't think that's that normal. Always audit your admin accounts. That's something that's huge. I mean, your admins should be performing admin tasks with their admin account and then have a separate account to check their email. I know, like Deloitte recently, I think someone was running one as an admin and checking their email. Like, they got popped. That happens. So make sure you audit your admin accounts. Who has access? I know your CEO wants domain admin, but your CEO probably doesn't need domain admin. Yeah, so checking for stuff with sysinternals tools. That auto runs will catch this. And if you try to run PowerShell, you explicitly try to run PowerShell, just PowerShell and then a command in auto runs, it'll come up red, which is a big alert. So definitely check that out. Auto runs is a great tool. Finds things that run automatically on your system for pretty much any place. Registry, directories, WMI, all that stuff. I'm a bit under, but that's okay. Technical references. Check out this presentation itself. I can go back to the first slide to give you the link to it if you'd like to grab it, the bit.ly link to it. If you want to grab that and check out the slides, they're open to view. All the demos are on there with a direct link and also embedded. Like I said, they weren't working at all last night embedded, so for some reason things started working better when I gave my presentation. Definitely check out all these resources. This is how I learned about this. These were great helps. The APT29 stuff, there's a great write-up on that. I did this, I practiced scheduling these things in C++. There's a way to do that and some sample code on my blog, wumbo.in, if you want to go there. And then the monitor malware script, which is on GitHub. It's on the gist, so you can grab it. And then the SimSweep repository. Check that out. Grab it. Like I said, I'm a bit under, but that's okay. I recorded my demos. Last time I gave this, I did the demos all live, but I was paranoid this time, so go me. So questions from anybody? Pretty good? Hello. What? In terms of what? I think I'm not 100% sure which version the WMI commands were added in. I want to say anything beyond PowerShell 3 are perfectly safe, but that's the case for most stuff. I'd have to look into that more closely. When in doubt, you can use WMIC, and WMIC will allow you to do all the same things. And it should be on everything since 2000, Windows 2000. So PowerShell's nice. It allows you to work with objects very nicely, but it's definitely, you can do it with WMIC or in C++ with the Windows API. That's a good point. So I had my demos have like select blank within, or select star from blank within 5, within 15. Don't do that if you're going to run this. If you're going to run these normally, don't do them anything under 30 because that's querying this thing over and over and over again. So that's definitely not something you want to do on a regular basis. And he said there's some versions that will cause CPU spikes just regardless, right? For particulars. Okay, so watch out for that. Test this if you're going to deploy it, as with anything. You had a question? Did you have a question? Okay. Okay. I don't think so. I think WMIC has that capability. I think you just specify a computer name and then you can specify username and password and allow you to execute stuff. I know PowerShell will allow you to do it, but I'm almost 100% sure that you can do it with WMIC. So as I covered before, I think I skipped over that part actually. You can run this via normal PowerShell remoting, either the non-encrypted or the encrypted version. And you can also run it over port 135. I have a challenge that I'm running for my company that one of the problems you literally have to connect to, it's just port 135 open, and then RPC. That's the only port open, and you can compromise the host completely. Pretty cool. With creds, you have to get creds. But that is somewhere else. Hopefully nobody that's on that challenge watches the video. Okay, anyone else have any questions for me? Yes, I can do that. Yeah, please. You're going to take a picture of one slide. This would be the one because this has the link. We'll try to put the link up on the YouTube video as well. Yes, this is the link to the slides. Check that out. Follow me on Twitter. I'm not sure if there's a way to do specific, like disabling specific methods. If you disable WMI as a whole, your system will not function. So I think it's kind of an all or none kind of thing. If you have that admin access, you have access to that port, like kind of game over if somebody wants to use it and you don't have good egress filtering. But if someone has your admin password, you've got bigger issues than that one host, I think. Local. All right, anybody else? Thank you guys so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Hopefully it was informative for you, and you can use it in some way in your jobs and tell people about it. Thanks.